of London, the City Law School. And one of my research areas is, of course, music copyright, in particular music borrowing. And what to say? I mean, I joined the these um, the talk copyright. I mean, since the very beginning, it was 2011 when I first joined it, right? I remember, and ever since I've been, here with Kwaku, commenting on different aspects of black music, uh, including the way the record industry works, the role of producers, the role of publishers. We have organized several nice events together, and I hope this will be one of them.
Indeed. Thank you very much. So, on that note, I will jump up to uh, Dr. Laura Thompson, who's in the room. Please give just an introduction at this moment in time.
Hello. I first of all, I like your beard. It looks fine. It shows something that we women can't do. It's brilliant. I think it's brilliant. So my name is Laura Thompson. I have a doctorate in information systems, and I studied music distribution systems as a part of my dissertation. And so I studied everything that looked like peer to peer before it was actually peer to peer and before it was illegal. And then I sat and waited, created a model, and I sat and waited. And now we're in the age of NFTs and interplanetary file systems and nodes and that sort of thing, and decentralization, which looks more like peer to peer. So I think maybe now is the time to have a conversation again from the time. And so I've had the opportunity to teach and teach in music business, and also teach in other areas of business and do research and that sort of thing. So I'm happy to be here, and I'm looking forward to having this conversation. Thank you for the invite. I appreciate it.
No, you are very welcome. And also in the room is Marcus Duff, who was the recent, he isn't anymore with the Jamaican IPO, Intellectual Property Office, but one of his last gigs was being the director of the Jamaican IPO, and he's an attorney at law, so I think he started focusing on his legal practice. So, Marcus, do you want to give a quick introduction?
Sure, sure. Just want to say thanks for the invitation. I'm very pleased to be here, today with you. Thanks, Paco. I haven't been on this program for some time, but I'm really glad to see you continuing the great work, that you're doing here. Greetings, Enrico. Greetings, Enrico. And Dr. Thompson. I also want to recognize Ms. Chantal English. She is from the Jamaica IP office. I asked her to join if she could. So we're looking forward to an engaging discussion with you all this evening.
That's fantastic.
Greetings, Marcus. Greetings. Are you on the north coast?
Relaxing here, Enrico.
Okay, so on that note, what can I say? I think maybe what I should do, since I had the idea, is to maybe give an example, and then that might put people in the frame of mind, because I think what I'm trying to do is a bit unusual. And so let's go to somewhere like 1715. I'm the owner of a copyright product. Does that encourage me? And remember, we're in 2022, but what I want us to do is also see how the law in the past can impact, or we can theorize how it could have impacted us. There's an argument for those that want long term. The longer the term, the more it incentivizes people to create. So I'm saying that here I am in 1715. We just had the Statute of Anne Act in 1710 that gives me copyright for 14 years. And if after the 14 years I'm alive, it can be extended for another 14 years. So that means if I die within the 14 years of it, so that'll be, I think, up to 1725, I think 1725, it will be in public domain. So, does that encourage me as a creator to keep creating? Since I've only got 14 years, I best 28 years. I want us to maybe comment on that using 21st century eyes. But you can go from anywhere. I'm going to pick on Rico because he seems to be too relaxed. So, Rico, did you hear the question? And how do you think you'd like to respond to such a situation if you're in, no, look, using 21st century eyes to look at a situation in the early 18th century?
Well, what I can say is that with the eyes of now, what I would think is we don't need such a long protection because I mean the difference is so evident. Just a few years of protection, and the what I immediately think is that broadening, widening, extending the protection of copyrighted works is not serving the very purpose copyright was born in 1910, right? So I would think at those terms and conditions, of those regulations in the early 18th century as a period where there was intensive creativity, and however this creativity or the fruits of this creativity were also picked up by publishers, basically, right? So what I know from reading the literature and was that even if copyright was formally assigned to authors, right, for a very short period of time, they remained without ownership because the way the industry was structured at that time was that the authors needed to anyway transfer the rights over their manuscripts to the publishers. There was no way they could exploit, they could sell their books without the publishers, right? And therefore it was kind of Pyrrhic victory because they have always been since that very moment instruments in the hands of publishers. And the situation has not changed so much, I would say, because the publishers have kept their power.
Okay, but I think I disagree if you were and say Pyrrhic victory, because I think there were some authors that probably were in a position to publish their books. Milton and stuff like that were rich authors, so if they wanted to publish their stuff, they had the option. To me, it could have been very easy for the statute of to put the power in the stationer's hand, because it was the stationers who were really petitioning for the Copyright Act, and for some reason they put in the hands of the author. So I think that was quite radical. But anyway, Marcos, you seem to be looking tentatively, so I'd like to have any response.
Sure. So I think, if you think of the pre-Statute of Anne period, and then the 1710, and then 5 years after, I think, as you say, for the copyright owners, for the authors, they would have, I suspect, been elated, right? Because there would have been a long period of time where they would have not been getting any recognition of their rights. It would have been owned by the stationers, the printers, and they would not have, had any guaranteed legal protection for their creativity. So even though it was a short period of time, contrasted to now, what we have, which, as I say, some say is too long, they, I think, would have been happy to have the law finally recognizing the skill and labor and effort of authors, and they would probably have embraced this 14 years with a possibility of extension. So not ideal perhaps, but I think, as you say, it was very historic and set us on the path to where we are now.
Indeed. And there were a lot of fights, so it wasn't that easy. Donaldson, there was quite a few fights trying to still wrest that power from the authors, and also talking about perpetual copyright. So there were people making the argument that you could not limit term and that it has to be perpetual. So there were all these fights that we had along the way. So, Dr. Laura, what do you want to add to this part of the conversation?
I want to add fire.
Go ahead, my sister. Probably we need it. So
Okay,
go ahead.
so I'm gonna say my initial answer is that it depends on what side of the spectrum you're playing on. And so if you are a family member and you're intending to hand down assets, real assets to your family, or if you're intending to teach and provide instruction about how to manage publishing and copyright over a long period of time, and that actually exists somewhere, then it is beneficial to maintain and continue to keep the copyright all the way through this time because specifically of what is happening in technology. In technology with interplanetary file system, what we're having is that people can upload. People can upload their content, and whoever uploads it ends up being the owner of that particular content. And they are established with a node. They have their own NODE node, and that node is based on a content ID. The content ID is very different from what we are functioning in, which is HTTP. HTTP looks at addresses and it is centralized. So so the rollout of this decentralized interplanetary file system we're 6 years in, and people are uploading content and establishing their own nodes. When you establish a node, that node, it points to the content, and that content is given a hashtag, and that hashtag stays with you forever. And eventually recommender systems are going to recommend based on the hashtags that apply to your content. No longer will we be dealing with HTTP, which is based on locations. And as a result, because if you look at JIPO, and I'm so happy with what JIPO is doing now, which is this international global copyright, which that's something that the U.S. really needs to catch up on. And other organizations that provide that global copyright, that global intellectual property, that's essential, because outside of that, you're having to, and that's why I said the training is essential. If we are at the year 1715, that parent, whoever that person is that has that copyright, is going to be their responsibility to pass the knowledge down throughout the generations, so that as people come to this time and age, they know what to do to preserve the legacy, the asset, and keep it within the family or keep it administered. So I hope that kind of gives an idea of. So I would say never let it leave the family. Never let it leave. Never always pass the knowledge down. Never let it go away, because that's like an asset. That's like giving away a house. That's like giving away something that. Yeah, I mean, why would you? I mean, I guess you would do that. You would do that if you can do that, and you can afford to just, make things. If you're a creator and you don't really care, but if you understand the business, you would really kind of think circumspectly about, well, what if I give this away and that, and what's the utility of me just giving it away? So that's the fire that I want to add today. Thank you for your time.
Okay, I'll come back to you. Two things. First of all, about the giving away, let's just be mindful. I remember many years ago, it must have been the 90s, we had IAM. And is this something international? African American Association, Black Music. And they started coming to England annually. And in one of the conferences, Jam and Lewis, the producer writers, they were very hot at that time. And someone asked about publishing. And he said, look, there's nothing like a perfect contract. They had some funny contracts, but you know what? We will not be where we are today if we had not gone through those type of contracts. And it says, up to you to make your call. Maybe are you happy with 100% of nothing or 50% of something? So coming back to what you said, you can have a house, but you can lease it, you can loan it, you can rent it. So the fact that you have it doesn't mean that no people can't engage with it. But the question I want to ask was that, are you saying that if someone posts something Web3 and then the node or whatever it is, and by the way, Dr. Laura will be doing something on the metaverse in July, so I don't want her to break all this thing
No,
down
it's
because
okay. It's
my head
fine.
yeah. So in July, you can get her to explain it. But the point I'm saying is, that I think the first person that sends a content is the owner, even if it doesn't belong to them.
Okay, so let's talk because we're not because you're talking about the publishing contract, and so you're going to hope that whoever you dealt with has the honesty and integrity to transfer the content in the publishing or the writer's contract into what they call a smart contract. Because and if they do that, then you could say, yeah, they will. If they do the smart contract, they will include you as the author. But if they don't, then you don't necessarily have a guarantee that it's going to include you. So hopefully everyone that's writing is dealing with people that they love and they plan to have relationships with for a long period of time. And if not, then consider having a buyout clause or consider having something where you're not going to be in a fight over this. And we are very, very, very early in the discussion, very early. And I am very much about individual people having their own nodes, learning themselves and supporting themselves. I'm more of a radical in that regard. I support the system, but I'm a disruptor for the music industry. So I'm going to show you how. I'm going to tell you what you need to do and how it's done, and then also tell you what's going on with the technology as well. So yeah, smart. The contract must transfer over to a smart contract, or else there's no deal, and that goes with IPFS, that goes with NFTs, everything. If it doesn't transfer over to a smart contract, you have no guarantees of what people will do.
Okay, that's cool. Chantel, do you want to make a contribution? Now and again, I'll call the audience just in case. But there's no obligation to make a contribution. It's just that I'm trying to facilitate a conversation. And Joan, I've sent a direct message. I'm just trying to see if you're the person I'm thinking you are. I could be absolutely wrong, but just in case you are, do respond to the direct message, Joan.
Paco,
Yes.
may I just ask you, Laura, a quick question?
Absolutely, it's a conversation. Go ahead.
I'm very interested in NFTs and especially for visual artists, right? And I mean, in the field of graffiti, street art, there are many visual artists, not only the famous ones, but also the lesser known, who tokenize, right? And they sign contracts. Is the same the world of music for musicians or songwriters or performers? My guess is that it's less pronounced there rather than in the field of visual art, where there are also these platforms which help a lot, no, putting together artists. I'm just curious, let's say.
When you say it's less pronounced, what is it? What exactly are you in? Are you saying the visual arts or the contract is less pronounced?
No, that musicians and songwriters or performing artists, they do tokenize less than visual artists do. That's my guess. I mean, but I'm not that knowledgeable in the field of music.
In some of the circles that I am in, there are a lot. It is not less. It is equal to. And people will do samples or portions of music. They may do it to raise funds to help other countries, to help, and so those things are pronounced and presented into a smart contract to consider all people that are involved in the. I'm hoping that, but ask me some more. Ask me some.
Very clear. So basically, the audience to which, I mean, such NFTs are sold are basically fan base, more or less.
They can be fan based, but they also can be based on cause. They can be cause based. See, the idea of an NFT, and that's something that I should mention, the non fungible token should have a story behind it in order for it to be successful. So whether it's a visual art, music, whatever that story is, that's the buy-in factor that will get people to engage and purchase and promote.
For both the big stars, like Beatles, that's the former Beatles, they've done it, but also for the less known.
Yes,
I guess.
yes.
It's democratic in this sense.
It
it's
is
democratic.
very much so.
And,
Level playing fields. Oops. So yeah, okay.
No, I brought this up to say I'm mindful that we don't get too much into this Web3 thing because we've got two programs that's going to look at it. On July 20th, we've got Oculus, which is actually music focused in terms of NFTs. It's a music NFT platform. So we've got Oculus blockchain NFT. The future of the music industry is already here. And then the week after, Sister Laura will be doing, let me get this out of the way. I can't even read and I've got my glasses on. Something about the metaverse. The metaverse is on. Anyway, it's got Dr. Laura's photo there. And that is July 27th, where she's going to it. But I want us to move the conversation forward. But before we do, can you quickly, Dr. Laura, explain what is a smart contract very, very succinctly because I want to move the conversation forward. Somebody's asked that in the chat. That's why I'm repeating that question to you.
The smart contract is really just the rules of engagement with which a person is going to, or a group of people will function in a decentralized fashion. So that's it's really the rules of engagement of how you're going to function, how you're going to distribute, it's rules of engagement, very similar. And we that are in the field of music, we should understand contracts because it's just how are we going to engage beyond in this Web3 space. That's really what it is. So if you understand contracts, smart contracts shouldn't be that difficult. And there's a lot of information about smart contracts out there. What kind, the different types, whether it's for book publishing, music, art, whatever. So yeah, or utility. Yeah.
But right, that's something I'll be looking at.
Okay.
Contract. So what I want to do is for us to remind you that when you booked, if let me just move this for when you booked, I put some ideas. So maybe we can look at some of the questions because these are triggers, but I hope the conversation can go anywhere. So I said, for example, okay. So I'll just go from the top. What if the automatic copyright reversion clause of the 1911 Act have been carried on into now? Because I think it didn't go into 1956 or the 1988 Copyright Act. The idea is that, right, in 1911, the Imperial Copyright Act said the last 25 years of the copyright reverse to the author. So the publisher, even if you sign a publishing contract, the publisher would not own the last 25 years. So it would be for the author to do whatever they wanted to, whether to re-sign it or to assign it to a different publisher or for them to exploit it. So now that does not exist. So this is the type of engagement conversation I want us to have. We are in 2021. What if we had that right now? How does that impact on the music? How do you think it will impact on the music industry? And you can take it from any angle that you want to. Maybe I'll start with Enrico. Does that make sense to you, Enrico?
Yes. I mean, I can't see very well the clause there because the image is a bit.
Yeah, it got blurry. There, it's better. It's better now.
Right now, I'm all over the place. Let me.
Here it is.
Stop share. Let me stop share. No, I just went online to get one of the ideas that I was speaking to. So I'll just repeat. I'm saying the 1911 Copyright Act. So like I said, I'm only focused on UK Copyright Act. Yeah. So the 1911 Copyright Act, which is also called the Imperial Copyright Act, allowed authors, even if they had assigned the copyright, to have the 25-year automatically reverted to them, the last 25 years, for them to reassign to the publisher or to anybody else if they wanted, or for them to exploit if they wanted themselves. So I'm saying that does not that wasn't carried through the subsequent Copyright Act 1958 or the 1988. So I'm saying, what if we had set a clause in today's Copyright Act? How would that impact on the music industry as you see as of 2022? So that's the question.
I mean, it would impact massively by balancing the powers of publishers, right? I mean, that would have to renegotiate, the terms and conditions after 25 years. I think it would be more democratic, and it would not, in my opinion, impact very much on the business of publishers, because 25 years you can plan strategies, you can recoup, you can contact anyway good business. I think it would be towards, I mean, restating something similar would be rebalancing the positions, the unbalanced positions within the industry.
Right. Sorry to carry, and that's the whole point of it being there. And I'm not sure, Laura, if you're aware, but obviously that also happens in America. Certainly, the recordings they
35.
were supposed to get after 35 years, and
Right,
that
yeah.
is a problem that it's come to bite the music industry, and we're still in the process. I'm not quite sure how they're dealing with it. But in America, quite frankly, all those acts that were signed in the 70s, a lot of the sound recordings are now coming back, or they should revert after 35 years. So I don't know how the American industry is dealing with it. It's been a lot of talk. I'm not sure how it works on the ground. But I would say this: if artists are not aware to accept their right to say, hey, Electra, you don't own that master anymore, the record companies will keep it in their catalog and keep exploiting it. But Laura, have you had any experience as to the 35-year reversion clause in America?
The only thing that I will say is that the legal counsel is making a lot of money off of both the record labels maintaining, and of course the artists. They unfortunately are coming up with a lot of loss because they don't really teach a lot in the school systems about the laws, the legal, and I mean, most people want to just be a musician, a performer, and they just want to be on stage, so they really don't pay attention too much to some of the aspects that they need to. And so yeah, you're having a lot of loss, a lot of people not getting what they should have, and I'm against it, but that's really what's happening, unfortunately. Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
To paraphrase Jay-Z, I'm a businessman.
Right.
This is the music business.
It is. It is all day.
So
everybody has to eat, right?
Right. But look how many people are on this call. Where are the musicians that need to be on this call? We, as part of British Black Music Month, we don't do the same old like doing performances and things. People do the creative thing.
Right.
We create forums to understand the industry, and where are they? I speak to musicians who not sorted their contracts, but they will not be humble to come and say, let's do it and sort it out. So, look, the information's out there. There's a lot of artist organizations, FAC, Featured Artists Coalition in America. You've got something similar that have been fighting. So, but it's for what was the Latin word? Caveat cantor, or whatever it is.
Okay.
Seller beware or something like that. So if you there you go, buyer or seller beware. I suppose in terms of the artist, the seller. If you're selling stuff and you're not aware of the marketplace, then please don't blame your counterpart.
Right.
Marcus, do you want to comment about what we've moved to the 1911 copyright contract and the idea of reversion? So the artist or the author has at least the last 25 years to do what they want to do with. What if that was happening in the 21st century? Do you think, how would that impact on the industry or the artists or creators?
I think it's a great clause. I think it's a great clause. I think it's a shame it wasn't included in more modern legislation. Nowadays we see that both in the US and in the EU, right, we have had this reversion introduced more lately. trying to rebalance copyright, right, in favor of the authors and creators. It's not an easy thing to organize. I think that's why many people don't really take up the opportunity to be able to renegotiate their rights. But I think it's a recognition that historically copyright has been unfair to the primary creators of music and copyright works otherwise. And so trying to have some legislative intervention to recognize that the authors in the final analysis have the rights then to reclaim and to re-commercialize their rights, I think is a great opportunity. Now, what I think we need to look at is why isn't it working? Why isn't it having the desired impact that we would want it to have, both in the USA and in the EU. In Jamaica, we also, of course, have a copyright term extension since 2015, and we have been looking at how to then, with that extension, have some accompanying measures that would be able to facilitate authors being able to reclaim and renegotiate and so forth. And we've seen, right, publishers who, of course, are trying to circumvent these rights that the authors now have. So I wanted to ask Laura, actually, why you don't support it. I already said that you are a disruptive in copyright, and so I see this as one of those disruptive areas that is focused on empowering performers. And of course, as we know, black performers have particularly been disadvantaged in copyright historically. So why wouldn't you support it, or how could you see we can make sure performers are able to eat more food out of their creativity?
Okay, so let me make sure I understand. What are you saying I'm not supporting?
I thought I heard you say you weren't supporting the right to reversion, the right to have the rights revert to the author in the final 25 years, or any at all. I thought that's what you were saying. Maybe
No.
Maybe I'm not.
No, I'm more not in support of, I guess, labels and legal counsel taking the right of performers. And so, for example, if a label already owns a catalog, and I've seen this, where a person passes away or something like that, there isn't much effort to reach out to maybe the co-author or anything like that to continue the relationship. They kind of just take the entire catalog and they move it on. And so, unless if that performer really understands the business and understands how to go after, and also has the money, the legal funds, or whether they have the legal funds or not, to go after the label to get that, then, and so that's what I mean. That's the part that I'm not supportive of labels taking advantage in this way. I hope I'm a little bit more clear, because
I understand.
Yeah. So, would it take a lot to the reversal? Yeah, and there's a lot of this is what if scenarios, and so, but the reality is that from what I've studied, even if there is a reversal, the labels have lobbyists, at least in the United States, that fight for positioning in territory. That's one thing. The next thing that they have researchers in other countries that enable them to bypass things that regular artists can't bypass. So as a result, music becomes a service and not a product. Music as a service it's a part of your. Every time I pick up the mug, the music comes on and somebody's getting a royalty, and it's not the artist that gets it. That's music as a service. You see that? So that's what I'm saying. And the artist is cut out of that completely. And this is why, even as it relates to social media and the amount of plays that music spins on social media, artists aren't really getting much of that anyways. So they might get like a little upfront money, but that's not really what's happening, So that's kind of what. So I'm not really in support of that. I want the artist to get a bigger piece of the pie, and there be a little bit of a more level playing field and more honesty as it relates to what's happening with marketing and distribution and that sort of thing, So
okay,
yeah,
right. yeah, I have to say that in the past, the artists or creative community have been a bit weak.
Okay.
But certainly, now we've got groups in the UK. We've got FAC, which is the Featured Artists Coalition. There's something similar in America, and I know they go to Washington and they do lobby on the behalf of their members. So they may not have the lobbying power of the industry, i.e., the record
Mm-hmm.
companies, but they certainly do punch quite a bit. So, but anyway, I'm glad Marcus asked that question because I thought of it for a moment and I should have asked for clarification. So at least Marcus has given you an opportunity
Mm-hmm.
to clarify. I noticed Chantel said she dropped her, but she's come back. So Chantel, have you heard anything? There's a conversation, as I said, that you want to respond to in any way. If so, please unmute yourself and contribute. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I know initially you were asking about 1710. I'm talking about status of and whilst I was commenting, I realized that I got booked off.
Oh.
Okay.
So right, so I was in agreement with the points raised by the other panelists in terms of recognizing the value of IP, not just for artistic works, dramatic works, on recording, but also looking at literary works, which include lyrics and so forth, and the protection. So I believe that the whole continuity, the extension from just the 14 years back in 1710 and the further additional 14 years that we could get, which would have been a maximum of 28 years. I believe that we have done justice in terms of making the time period longer, and also for the continuity and also the value of intellectual property similar to real property and recognizing that value. Now, onto
Oh,
the other discourse conversation that is going on now, I am certainly in agreement, especially with the point that Dr. Goff just raised, as it relates to there really must be a balance, and creators are to be rewarded for the works that they have done and recognized for their hard work. So those are my two words
okay, fair enough.
contribution.
Fair enough. I'll say in 1715, I wasn't looking forward to any longer copyright term. I was glad that at least the law had given me power over my creative works and that I could go to a publisher I want and strike the deal that I could get. I want to throw a couple of things in the works that has come out of Chantel's contribution. First of all, can we say that in 1715, the only copyright work was the literary, the written work, books. So obviously we didn't have modern inventions such as records and stuff. But even music was not covered. A whole raft of things that we take for granted today were not covered. It only covered the literary work. Public performances of music, for example, came in 1842 and stuff like that. So that's the first thing. But secondly, there is this argument against long term. People like Professor Lessig and others have sort of for in fact during the American copyright situation, trying to extend copyright by 20 years. They call it the Mickey Mouse copyright extension. Now people like Lessig were fighting against it. And let us go back to the basics of copyright. There's an argument that says that copyright is contract between the community and the business. So we're giving you a limited time to exploit it, and then it should come back from where it came from, society, which is the public domain. So there is a counter argument that long copyright is not necessarily a good thing. So let's be mindful about that. The long copyright is not necessarily a good thing. That's why I started with us having a short copyright term like 14 years to 28 years. So I've thrown that in there. I'm quite happy for someone to take the conversation elsewhere. If not, I'll go back to the Eventbrite and see what I put on there, and maybe that can be the next point of conversation. But I'm mindful that we want this to flow. So you can't take it anywhere at all, as long as we were speaking to some part of the Copyright Act, no matter which period.
So I have a comment question. So are we assuming that the copyright is just the author that's or are we assuming that these copyrights are a co-situation between the author and the publisher. Like the initial copyright. Go ahead.
No, are you talking specifically about the start? Because I started off with a question framed around the statute of Anne. That's why I said 1715. So are you talking about that period? Are you talking about copyright in general?
Yeah, like in general, and
Well, well, if it's in general, the point I made was that to me the starting point of the copyright history is statute of Anne only because the copyright resided with the author, the author, and that comes from a history of the business they used to call stationers, because in those days all you had were publishers, book publishers, and they were fighting to own it, and so they were fighting to have a law. But the law turned out not to give the copyright to them directly, but to the author. So that means they had to negotiate it with the author. So that, I hope, answers your question. If it does, then I'm going to move on to the next thing that, as suggested, we could look at. What if there's no copyright protection for musical compositions? And I just said that a moment ago that musical compositions only had copyright protection from the 1842 Act. So let's throw this out, and I'll start with Enrique again. We're in the music business, or most of us are. At least this is being done under the auspices of British Black Music. It's British Black Music Month. So what if in 2022 there was no copyright act that protected music? We're not going to say music would not exist because before the Copyright Act there was music, and I'm very sure if copyright did not protect music, there'll still be music. But now let's look at it in relation to us knowing that there was an act which protected music from 1842. But what if that act did not exist and that there was no copyright protection for music? Would that impact on where we are now?
No, I think it would impact negatively. I mean, I am still in favor of the double copyright protection for the composition and then the recording. It depends on how large is the scope of rights that we give. That's the point. I think that both composers and recording artists, they should be protected. So I don't think it would be a positive development to abolish, let's say, copyright over the song composition, right? What we should limit, what we should talk about in terms of limiting the scope of rights. So which is given to protect basic and unprotectable elements of composition, right?
Can you be a bit specific now? Be a bit specific about the limitations you're talking about. Give examples of what you mean by limits.
Well, for example, the right of adaptation, right? The right of adaptation, which is one of the most important rights in the field of music copyright. We have seen cases in the past where such a right has been interpreted extensively, in order to prevent others from merely adapting a composition, right? So that's the real problem. I mean, abolishing the copyright over the song composition would not serve the interest of creativity, music creativity, in my opinion.
Okay. Before I throw it out there, can I just make the point that music was being made before the Copyright Act came? So I'll argue that music would have been made even if there was no protection. But Marcus, what's your take on the idea of copyright from?
Sorry, Quaco.
Yeah.
There is also a book of a few years ago, the Lunney, Copyright Excesses, which has demonstrated empirically that by analyzing business data of music creation after the Second World War until our times, that basically is a correlation between strong protection and less creativity.
By strong protection, do you mean longer term? Is that what you mean?
Yes, longer term, and therefore less creativity. It has been, demonstrated by it, and which should make us reflect, right? A too protective copyright protection of both song recordings and composition clearly go against creativity. I mean, many academics and also practitioners are aware of that. This does not mean that we should abolish copyright. In the first place, over both subject matter, because it's true what you said, that Kwaku, that music has been created intensively before copyright laws were around. But now that they are here with us, abolishing them would not be.
Oh no! I'll rephrase the question then. Not abolishing, but rather, what if we didn't have that protection? That's what I meant. Not abolishing. So what if we didn't have that? As of 2022, we never had that.
You mean you never had any music protection?
Yes.
Of the composition, of the song composition.
Yeah. So maybe let Marcus come. You can answer that later, Marcus. So yeah, what if the composers didn't have any right in music?
Well, they would be starving more than they're starving now. They would be exploited more than they're being exploited now. So I think we have to still, be thankful for small mercies, right? But if you think back to, as you say, with this started off in 1710, and it's focused on literary works, right? Because of the strong lobby of the stationers, right? The printers. To now, in the 21st century, where, the value of the global music industry is magnanimous. It supersedes literary works, I think that, music has come around to be recognized properly at the forefront of copyright, but within the copyright construct, let's say, the authors still are not at the top of that pyramid, in terms of earnings. And that's, I think, where we still need to work on getting the right balance,
Okay.
So when we talk about the term of protection, I heard what Enrico mentioned a while ago, that, too long a term of protection sometimes causes lack of creativity. People always wonder, well, why are patent rights only 20 years? Trademarks are 10 years, and then copyright is like life of the author plus, and the only real answer when we look at history is because of the strength of the lobby, as Laura was saying, of these producers and others who are not the original creators, but who have the money to be able to control the industry, and how the industry gets to get the services and goods, consumed by the public. That's where we have a big problem, So we talk about, like, in patent law, we talk about the concern of the patent trolls, the pharmaceutical companies, and there's big concern about that, even COVID-19, right? How these companies are earning so much, and people are suffering, can't access medicines and so forth. But we don't have the same kind of concern about these copyright trolls, who control and maximize all of these rights in their archives, you know what I mean? And the creators, as I say, don't get the sustainable income to be able to continue creativity. So I think we must be grateful, as I say, for what we have in terms of where we're coming from, but certainly I think we've seen enough to know that we need to really restructure the copyright system to be more fit for purpose for the creatives.
Okay. Thanks, Laura. I'll go to you, Laura. Do you want to add anything in the sense that we're saying, what if, as of now, music composition didn't have any copyright, so the composers didn't have any copyright protection? What would they change? My view is that composers will still compose. And if they had patrons, as they had in the 18th and 17th century, the patrons will finance them. Or they could collect money at the door or something like that. So I think music will still be made. But anyway, what is your take on it, Dr. Lara?
I agree with that sentiment. I also believe that a lot of people that are currently making money would be out of employment. So and some people, even in this I'm gonna just mention, in this Web3 space, they're kind of hoping that something like that might happen. It doesn't mean that without the organizations, there is no structure. I think it probably would just be like a free playing field where anybody that has an opportunity to expose their talent or whatever, it's like the real marketplace. It's like real business, and everybody has a fair chance. And it's up to the individual then to take on that chance and try to make something happen. So I agree with you in that instance, and I also would add and just say that a lot of the attorneys, a lot of the people that are processing the paperwork, they wouldn't have a job because there wouldn't be anything for them to do. So that's my immediate take on it. Yeah.
Okay then. Cool. I think maybe it might be fair to open this up to the audience. So, does anyone have any comment to add to where we are at the moment? I'm mindful that if we can open the conversation to those in the audience now, that's also valid. So, I'm not, unfortunately, the names are not familiar to me, so I can't really pick on anyone. I was very curious.
Uncle,
Yes,
are you talking about people who are listening?
yes.
Okay. There is an issue now about copyrights, and people don't quite understand copyrights. Perhaps I don't understand it myself either. So I dabbled along about 12 years ago and registered my own copyright without lawyers. And I've been during the registration process, you have a warning coming up if you tell warning that if, let's say, if I'm doing something illegal, that I've been breaking the law. And I went through my registration process that went on. And when they was warning me, I thought to myself, who the hell are these people? What make them think that I can't read and write? So now I tell people I can't read and write, but I managed to live. And I don't want to ramble up time, but all people, black people, need to understand that you don't have to understand what copyright is what I know and you know. Full stop. And I tell
Okay. But Alcina, let me come back to you on that. This particular forum was not meant to break down what copyright meant. So it was never meant to be a seminar to explain copyright. The assumption was that we understood it and we want to talk more to the history and how that impacts the music business. But I want to clarify a couple of things. I know you're a go-getter, so you obviously go and do what you have to do, whether in the field of politics and stuff. So I know a bit of your background. Can I say, first of all, of course, I don't say black, I say African people, if I mean African people. But this is not limited to African people, it's limited to creative people of any race. Creative people generally don't understand not just copyright, but the business. They're interested in creating. That is why they have people like managers to take out the business side. So I'll say, Sister Encino, the subject of copyright that is intricate and very confusing. It's not just confusing people of African heritage, it's confusing to people of any racial heritage. But having said that, let me clarify something again. In the UK, people sometimes confuse copyright with other things. You have to register when you do designs, when you do a trademark, when you do patents. That's a different thing. But in the UK, you do not have to register copyright. I'm hoping I'm not going to end up doing a copyright of 1.1. You don't have to register copyright. You create copyright once it's original, you haven't copied anyone, you put in a fixed form, blah, 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 blah. So I'll just put that out there and leave it there because I really don't think we want to do a copyright. We've got other programs. I think we've got other programs in British Black Music that will talk about that. So you should come to the one we do Musicians Union. I think that will break it down a bit. So to cut a long story short, you probably talk about what we call another part of intellectual property. It could have been a trademark which you had to register yourself. It could be a patent which you had to register yourself. But in terms of copyright, you don't have to. But yes, there are some private entities that say they are registering, in quotes, your stuff. All they are is just a repository for your work. So if something happens and you want to go to court, they can vouch that on 2nd February 1985, yes, Elsina registered this work with us. So that just gives proof as to when that work was in existence. Having said that, there's anyone from the audience as well, but it's still a good point because it's made me speak to a couple of things, Sister Elsina. So, does anyone in the audience want to pick up on something else? Yeah.
I wanted to applaud Elsina for going through the process and trying to figure out how to fill in the application herself so that she could obtain this. And that's usually the first step. At least she has interest. And I have an itch for people that, I mean, I'm literally itching like allergic to people that don't even have an interest to find out how to protect the thing they created. And I'm going to put myself on mute at that point.
No, no, yeah.
It
you
just
make a
makes
good
me
point.
itch.
I happen to know Sister Alcina. She's into politics and stuff, and she does go and get the forms and do as much as she can herself, whether it's the
That's it.
EU and blah 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 blah. So, does anyone else in the audience want to respond to anything? As is a conversation, you may want to take it from what we've thus far discussed. And I want to point to John McCormack. Are you the person involved with urban development or UD? Your last name sounds familiar, but I'm not sure if that person is also called John. But there's a lady that started a project in East London helping particularly young people get into the business and understand the business. So they do a lot of workshops and stuff like we're doing now. So I was just wondering if that's the same person that started it. But okay, so maybe I'll jump to one of the other points I put up for possible discussion. Okay, so I think we've talked about this, but I'll be specific. What is sound recording had a term of just 50 years? The reason why I'm putting this out there is that in the last few years, the UK and the EU have increased the term of sound recordings to 70 years. It used to be 50 years. Indeed, people are not aware, but in America, it's actually 95 years. And I think in Mexico, they probably have not sound recordings, but their copyright term is life plus 100 years. So, in terms of the 70 years, it's fairly recent. So, in fact, a number of books will speak to term of sound recording being 50 years. So, I'm asking the question, what do we think about us having right now the term of sound recording is 70 years. If I was in 1950, example, I only have 50 years to exploit my work. So coming back, it seems like we just talked about term. I hope we have another thing to talk about in a moment. But there was a lot of people that fought against the increase from 50 to 70 years, just like they did in America as well, from the 50 to 70 years for the Mickey Mouse copyright extension. So I'll just come back to Enrico. I probably know what you're going to say, but still, for the record, what is your view on the sound recording term? Had it been recently, but I mean, I think about 10 years ago, extended to 70 years as opposed to the previous 50 years? Enrico.
Well, Kwaku, my assessment is really negative. I mean, this what has been done in 2011 in Europe with this directive, that is to say, to extend the term of protection of sound recording from 50 to 70 years is wrong, and it's just justified on the basis of lobbying, strong lobbying by the industry, and without any evidence-based policy, right? I just want to quote. I have here because I wrote recently a chapter on phonograms, and in the Gower's report of 2006, the Gower's report was an IP review made by an expert on behalf of the government. Well, this report reported the opinion of Dave Rowntree, the drummer with Blur, with the British brands Blur and Ailerons. I quote from the report. The drummer saying, "I have never heard of a single one band deciding not to record a song because it will fall out of copyright in only 50 years. The idea is laughable," which is true. I totally agree on that. The official justification for such extension of protection is that we need to incentivize recording artists, right? To create more recordings. Now, this is the utilitarian function, the doctrine of copyright. claims that is not true. Most creators in the music field, not only recording artists, I would say also composers, and also in other fields of visual arts, whatever, they don't create, they don't come up with new stuff because they have 50 or 70 years of protection. The idea is laughable. Dave Roundtree was true when he was asked that. Mm, this is just,
Okay.
I mean, this is as clear as crystal.
Okay, you quoted the Gowers report. Prior to that, there was a Harvard's report as well. Harvard's report.
The Gowers was before, and then
Oh,
the Hargreaves report. Yeah,
Was Gowers before Hargreaves?
yeah. Gowers was 2006. Hargreaves was 2011.
Okay, and they both did not make an argument for term extension necessarily. They did look at an economic argument, and they said, I mean, the 20 extra is going to make minuscule economic sense, but nevertheless, that is what we got. Can I just say, I think it may be less.
Marco, I just want also to add that everybody in the industry knows that the market life of a sound recording, most of the cases, is the first 10 years, right? Apart from, notable exceptions, but on the average is like this. So it doesn't really make economic sense for 99% of the
records out there.
Of course, maybe Marcus, the Coxon family, the Sonia Pottinger, they don't like this position, of course, because they want to charge royalties for an additional 20, 30 years, right? And
well, yeah, I was
I
just
kind
going
of
to say that, I mean, so right now in Jamaican music, there's a big discussion about where is it gone? What has happened to our good Jamaican music, because what's been produced nowadays by the younger artists, people are saying is not so audible and has lost its moral compass, and we want to go back to the good old 90s and 80s and 70s music, and so you have a lot of parties nowadays, I mean, since COVID has been lifted, where people are keeping only 90s parties, only 90s music they're playing, or you have all these, they only want to hear some ska and some rocksteady and some Bob Marley and some Studio One. And so I'm saying, why shouldn't they be able to continue to earn if there's continuing demand for their copyright works?
It looks.
By the way,
it looks
can
like.
I just
Sorry, Marco. It looks like more wording a monopolistic rant to me, rather. I love Cox, I love these big producers, and I really accept the idea that their children or the people who now there must, also take advantage. There is a limit. I mean, so I understand them.
How long? Can I just come in? Marcus, can you confirm, is this term of copyright protection for sound recordings in Jamaica 50 years?
No, it's more.
So our law was amended in 2015. So the producers have life plus 90. That's just Chantal, yes.
No, not for a recording. The recording wouldn't have life plus.
So right. Recording 95 years.
95.
Right.
So you've gone the American way then. You've gone the American way.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, because I'm okay. You've gone. Okay, I see. Okay. So there you go. On Rico, they've got 95 years to explore the sound recordings.
Right. Again, we had a big debate here. Is that too long? Why we're going so far? Why we're going past the EU and going toward the US? And so we're not saying that is perfect or that is how it should be, But again, the lobby prevailed.
Right. Can I just throw something in the works? During the discussions about the extension in the UK, I think it was the Music Managers Forum, obviously the representative organizations for managers, and maybe those in the creative section of the music industry, I think put forward the idea. There's one, use it or lose it, but more importantly, they were saying that if you're going to extend it, that 20 years should be for the artists to control and be remunerated, considering that record contracts as it is had the time they've not recouped, so they're not making any money. So that's an idea, but I don't know how in practice that's happened. Uh, so what's happening is that in the UK now we've got 20 years extra. The record companies are collecting money, and I dare
Yes.
say that if it's not recouped, then you'll be 20 years without seeing the money. So it may not have necessarily benefited the creative community, i.e., the recording artists. Right.
Agree, Paco. Agree.
So maybe I'll jump to another topic that I suggested. No, okay. So we all learned about the music industry and maybe learned a bit of copyright history to some extent. So can we jump to one aspect of any cop- time in copyright and pick on an article in that Copyright Act and try and discuss how that would impact in 2022, if it was in our law or wasn't in our law? I hope you got the sense of what I'm trying to do. We've been historical to some extent in looking at copyright as opposed to just purely legalistic. So, Marcus, since you seem to be, what should I say, the light seems to be on you. Can you want to pick up something in any copyright act, maybe including the Jamaican Act, or eh, actually I can open up anything that you know in terms of copyright act that it's not now, and say what if it was now?
If it was no.
Yeah.
So
Or
I guess
maybe or it should be introduced. So you can argue either way. Maybe it's a good thing it's not in now, or maybe it should have been introduced so we can have it in 2022.
right. So I mean, just following my whole, feeling that we need to have more revenue in the hands of the creatives, then my mind says, why, can't we, and maybe why didn't we back then have the producers' rights be limited, but the author's rights continue for a longer period of time, you know, so that you would have the ability to have the creatives continue to earn. So would the producer be able to earn, but not so much, because as we see, oftentimes the producers are able to get through contracts so much of the creatives' rights that the creatives, don't get much left after they've signed those contracts. So what if we had differential terms of protection for producers, and also what if we had in copyright law some kind of unfair contract terms, because that's a big part of the history of copyright as well too,
Yeah.
that so many young artists sign away everything just to go on stage and to get the chance, and not understanding properly all of the details of copyright and so forth. So if we could review some of these contracts with all these labels in the past that have been so exploitative, how can we turn the thing upside down? So I don't know if that's too much
That
to
is
think of.
fantastic. No, this is the type of discussion we want to have, and this is fantastic because that speaks particularly to where you are in Jamaica, because generally two things. In you talked about contracts. Generally, what's happened is that the producers just took everything. So it was an assignment. So you literally just like work for hire. You got paid your £20, and that was it. So when the record producers started doing deals with UK and Europe, when the money came, they didn't have to look at the artist or the creator and say, "Hey, this is a show. You got paid on that session £5, and that is it for life." So in terms of your trade practice in Jamaica, that makes perfect sense to make such an argument. So that I think is fantastic. So it's this type of discussions that I want us to have. What if? It's a what if discussion, and it's very, very relevant. Maybe not so much for the UK, but certainly in Jamaica, and I'd imagine parts of Africa as well, where the industry practice isn't very developed. What tends to happen is that the producer tends to own everything, even when they don't. They don't only own the recording, but they own the composition as well. I'm not going to name names, but how many producers have their names down as composers of reggae classics? So
Yes.
that is a good what if. And actually use the word review. There's no reason why your lawmakers can't go and review historical bar situations and do some sort of reparative laws to sort of mitigate what has been to the detriment of the creative communities. So, Dr. Laura, I think
Paco.
Marcus has. Hold on one moment. Hold on one moment, Elsina. Marcus has given us a good idea about this what if situation. So, do you have a what if situation that you want to bring to the table that we can review or talk about?
Yes,
Yes.
I wanna piggyback off of something that Marcus said, and then I'm gonna bring up something from the Dramatists Guild because I'm a member of the Dramatists Guild as well, and we deal with copyrights all the time. So, um, this is what I do. I own a label, um, like the full meaning of a label, and so um, when I've gone into studio to record, I not only pay the artist, but I also write the. Um, I pay them as a work for hire, but when they contribute notes, because I read music, I'm a musician, I read music, so when they contribute something to the original, so the musicians are given something. And I'm going to give you a typical example. There's a tune called Leo's Taps that won a couple. It was in a couple of film festivals in 2020. I'm the original author of Leo's Taps, but I have included musicians that added to the original. So I presented some sheet music, and the people that played the sheet music, it's a jazz tune. It's called Leo's Taps. It's out there. Um, the people that did it exactly as okay. That's work for hire. The people that added to the narrative of what was already there, what we call improvision, they not only got paid for the work that they did, but where royalties are coming in, they're supposed to get royalties for that. And so the royalty system has to be set up so that they can continuously get paid. And that actually means that they themselves have to have a business that enables them to receive the financial stream once I set up everything that they're supposed to get. So I just wanted to say that to add to what Marcus said, because what I'm doing is not really done. Most times you do the work, you go into the studio, you get the work for hire, that's it. And some people, they're fine. They're gig musicians. They just want to do the producers, the engineers, they want their engineering credit. They're done with it. Once they get their money, they're like, okay. So, but you have to.
Now, before you go,
Go ahead.
hold on. Before you go to the next point, I'll just throw two things. I'll make a comment and ask you a question. There is a big hit by Walk on the Wild Side, Lou Reed, a rock musician, and he recorded in London. Walk on the Wild Side is his only big hit. It's driven by a bass line. He did not write that bass line. But the credit as a writer is Lou Reed. So Lou Reed is making money every day from that song. And the bass line that drives the song was written by, I think, Herb Flowers, a British session musician. So my question to you before we move on to the next point is this an ex gratia payment, or are you co-crediting them as writers? So are they co-writers credits, or are you just giving this money as an ex gratia payment because they've added to the composition?
Okay, so this is what I mean. I mean, they have a fee that they charge for going into the studio, so they're getting that particular
But that's
fee.
as musicians. No, that's
As
as
musicians.
musicians.
Right?
No, let's leave that aside.
Okay.
We're talking about the compositing side.
So as a writer, so my copyright has certain ones as writers where
That's
they
fine.
wrote
That's the
on.
question I'm asking.
Okay.
Yeah, so you're adding them as co-writers.
Yeah.
That's the point. Okay,
Yeah.
go to your next
Okay,
point.
so now,
please.
but the next point really piggybacks off of this, because in the Dramatists Guild, we have some of the same ideas, and this might set some ants on fire. I'm reading from an article that the Dramatists Guild has, and it's based on something written by John Wildman in December 1999, and the title of that article is "No Copyrights for Directors." So I'm reading one sentence. Allowing ownership of ideas rather than the specific expression of those ideas would completely stifle meaningful creativity. I'll read the sentence again. Allowing ownership of ideas rather than the specific expression of those ideas would completely stifle meaningful creativity. That's a statement that he has made. And that's something that is being argued on any platform right this second, whether it's a person acting, whether a person singing, whether it's somebody that took an idea from you, Quaco, and they decided to do the logo, the expression of your logo, and then all of a sudden now you're an NFT. And I go back to the NFT because it's a big discussion. I won't go there, but it's there. This discussion is like fire right this second, because a lot of artists are seeing their worth go beyond the thing that you paid them for, and all of a sudden they're like, man, I'm not getting any more money, and I should be getting more. I should claim, I should sue. And so these are the things. Go ahead.
All right, what you've done is that and that's a conversation. You can't be prescriptive about it. So we go into the territory of contracts, and I will break it down in a moment. I think Sister Asilians put some stuff in the chat. I think registration, I'm not sure if you're talking about PRS registration. I think for a publisher, I think it's about £400 or so. So I've seen £400 in there. That is not copywriting, but that is registering to be a member of a collection society. I suspect that is what you're talking about, Sister Elsina. But coming back to what Dr. Lara has just spoken about, this is something that you have to understand contracts. Who owns copyright? If you've got a website and you get someone to design it, or even a logo, if you've not sorted out the copyright, the contract to assign the copyright to you, you can use that logo, but you don't own the copyright. So now that we're moving to this new world of NFTs, the designer, who's an independent creator, can NFT that logo. Because the copyright resides in him. Let me break that down one more time. There's a lot of things that we use and we think we own, but technically we don't own. We've got the right to use it, but that doesn't mean we own it. So let me give you an example. I've got a design on my website. The website creator has created my website. If by contract he has not assigned that design, my website can legally use it by all means. But he, as the owner of the copyright, can go and do a t-shirt with that image on them. There's nothing I can do about it because he owns the copyright. Copyright ownership is important. Don't assume because it's on your website or because you pay. Payment is no guarantee of ownership. Payment does not mean you've got ownership. Let's get that clear. Until you got a piece of paper, often assignments is best written. Unlike licensing, an assignment should be in writing. So if that designer is not written in writing, that blah blah, that is it. Of course, in America, you have things like work for hire. So if it's in the studio as a work for hire, the assignment comes to you and there's no issue with it. That's how a lot of people play in America. This is a work for hire. That presupposes that the assignment belongs to whoever has hired you, and that is it. So that is a good point, just for clarification. So,
and a lot of people would disagree with you in the NFT world, but there's a lot of what you're saying that is very correct, because people, and I want to go back a little bit, it's still on this same discussion, because it seems like for the length of time, maybe there should be a tier of people that can extend a copyright so that we don't have to be here. Maybe there should be some sort of tier and maybe a fee that group of people pay for the extension. If they're not willing to pay that fee, then let's let everything go back to the author, the original author, so that they can begin the process of recouping and doing whatever they need to do. And this is not just for music, but this is for the movie industry, all the industries where copyright is, and you're not really getting what you want to get. So yes, I'm sorry, I just threw that in there, but yeah.
No, but that's interesting. That's a conversation. So what someone says might lead the conversation somewhere. So back to Lessig. By the way, Lessig, Professor Lessig, I think a single S, L-I.
I think it's L-E-S-S-I-G.
So it's a double S. Right, one of the leading authorities on copyright, particularly in America. And one of the things we're arguing for is that, you see, if you got long copyright, what happens is that you have things called orphan works, things that nobody knows the owner, but because of the law, you can't really use it because you're infringing someone's copyright. So one of the things that is suggested is that why don't we sort out this? If you want your work to still be active, pay a fee. Then we know you are being proactive rather than just the law let you let this thing hang in there and no one can legally use it. So that fee brings someone to be proactive, or someone said, "I never made money out of it. I don't care." So everybody can use it. So
Yes.
that was what so made me go on there. But Marcos,
Good idea. Good idea.
go ahead. Oh, I
Sorry.
thought you were going to say something.
I was just gonna say I like that idea actually. Yes, because as you say, use it or lose it.
Yes.
It's not quite the same thing. But if you have it in a shorter period and you say, well, you get it for like maybe 20 years, you get it first, and then
Yes.
if you want to renew it, you pay some more. If you don't, then it goes back to the author. I like that idea of the
Okay.
law.
Or else it could let's not forget the public as well, the concept
Right.
of public domain.
Mhm.
Or it could go into public domain so somebody can reuse it as well. Let's not
Yes,
forget that
yes,
the
yes.
argument for some is that copyright is a contract between society and the creators and the industry. So you can have it for a limited period and then it should come back to the pool for anybody in society to use it. So let's not forget the society or individuals. Yeah, so what shall I say, rights in this conversation. Enrico, you've been a bit quiet. Do you want to come back on
Yes.
any idea? Not necessarily what we talked about. We can extend the conversation to another direction. Is it
Any idea what on?
no anything to what I'm trying to say is that I wanted a conversation. It can go anywhere. So if you've
Okay,
got
okay.
an idea to talk about, maybe that can be the next point of conversation.
Okay, I provocatively introduced this topic. What do you think about the Sheeran judgment? Ed Sheeran judgment. Do you think it? I think personally it was the good outcome I was hoping for. Because I thought that it was the building block of a certain genre that had been just 2 words, 3 words. So I was quite relieved.
Right, I think you need to break down quickly what the Ed judgment is about because not everyone on the call would know. So can you quickly just tell us?
Yes, of course. Okay, there was a litigation between Ed Sheeran, who was accused was accused of copyright infringement for, let's say, replicating just 3 seconds of Sami Chokri song. So Ed Sheeran song was "The Shape of You," the famous song which has won awards, sold a lot. On the other hand, you had Sam Chokri, a grime artist here in England, who fought, this legal battle because he thought that some elements of his song "OY" had been replicated by Ed Sheeran in his own composition. It's just two words basically. I mean just 2 words. So and the melody of it. So
Right, so what was the judgment?
it was cleared. Ed Sheeran won the case quite
Okay.
comfortably because the court basically in fact it was a judgment merely in fact. I mean they believed that it was not basically 2 words were not protectable, right?
Okay. Okay.
I mean, it has been a massive case, a massive decision.
Yeah. Okay, in this case, I agree with Enrico, but I do not agree with Enrico to do with the spirit versus what is the band? Led Zeppelin, Stairway to Heaven. I honestly think that it was just too similar. But you agreed with the judgment, which was that Led Zeppelin had not infringed the spirit cover of Taurus or whatever it's called. But I thought, no way. But having said, courts are not perfect. Courts are not perfect. I think there was something as well, which it might be Rolling Stone or a famous band. I think copy someone's music. But if you've got good lawyers and stuff to make your argument, you can win even though you may have infringed. So it's not perfect. But anyway, so the question now that Enrico, I've got Enrico to clear is this: He says, what do you think about the recent judgment where Ed Sheeran was cleared of copyright infringement? His song is a big song called The Shape of You. A grime artist in UK, grime is a UK type of hip hop. Artist said that they had infringed the style. But can I just say something? As a copyright person, you know that it's not the quantity, it's the quality. So whether it's 2 seconds or 3 seconds, it's neither here or there. Whether it's substantial, it's indefinable. It's a qualitative rather than quantitative thing. So Marcos, have you heard of this case? But even if you haven't heard of it, between Enrico and myself, we sort of explained the case. So you're welcome to give an opinion. What do you think?
Well, yes, I think sometimes with these type of copyright cases, it boils down to looking at the similarity, of the taking, as you say, not how much, but how similar is the quality of it. And it sometimes comes down to a subjective analysis by the judge or judges, as to whether it's copying or whether it's just merely taking the idea but in a similar but different form. So the judgment seems to suggest that the judges found that there were similarities but still differences that they felt were therefore not constituting an infringement. And so I think that that's how the copyright law works. That is not clear cut, which some people feel is frustrating, because we would have these principles, and then they have to go to court for the court to then analyze and say, does it cross the line? Does it not cross the line? Where's the line? All of that. And of course, no one wants to really have to go to court to deal with these things. So I can't speak to the case specifically per se, but what I would say is that I think if we had more tribunals, that were accessible to the average artist, not only to the big artists who have, some money to pay lawyers and to be in court for years, but some sort of copyright tribunal that the average person can bring a claim before, don't have to have a lawyer, can have it dealt with in a quick, efficient, and affordable way. That would probably be a good way to have these things resolved, in a
Right.
more
I
predictable
think
manner.
you've made a good case, and that's the whole point of this type of conversations. What you're speaking to is nothing new because we do have the principles of small claims courts where you don't need a lawyer to make a claim. So by all
Right.
means, and indeed, when the IPO started, which the UK is the Intellectual Property Office, there was supposed to be such a court that made it easy to sort these things out. But I think you still have to have some serious money. So yes, you're actually suggesting something a bit different, a small man's court in which you can do these things. Laura, you don't necessarily have to speak to the a Sheeran case, except if you want to. But if you want to speak to a case in which maybe plagiarism or copyright issue that you know about, then you can bring it to a conversation.
Well, I had an opportunity to look at the case, and one thing that I will say briefly is it is hard to prove intent. It's very difficult to prove intent. And so, depending on the industry that you're in, some artists will be honored that a piece of their work is carried on into the next, right? And others will not feel will feel like something is owed to them. So, for example, if we're talking classical music and people have pulled the influences, so there is intent and there's influence. So people go to school, they learn classical music so they can understand influence, and then from that classical music, if you're a composer, you can be influenced by that. And those that really understand music can say, oh yes, I can hear the influence of this person here, I can hear the influence of that person here, right? And that's a compliment. Whether you're doing music, whether you're painting, like I'm a surrealist, so when I paint, I like Dali. I like Dali, and there's some things that are not there that come out, right? So the influence, I'm not going to go ahead and look at a Dali painting and I'm going to paint the exact thing. I'm into the influence and why they did what they did. When I do music, I'll listen. I'll go back 20 years or so, and I will listen, and I'll become influential. I'm shifting from keyboard to saxophone. My father was a saxophonist. And so now all of a sudden I'm like, oh, hold on. When I remember how he played, it goes. I have to go back to the 50s. I have to listen to real saxophonists from the 50s so that I can get the influence and properly play like my dad. Now, influence, intent. How do we prove intent? And so okay, let's talk. Kwaki, do you have music that's out there? And if somebody, how would you feel if somebody, you know?
Yeah, well, I think it's the spirituality of the person. Some people are cool with it.
Mm-hmm.
Some people think, yeah, that is cool. They pay homage to me. Some people say, where is the money? Show me the money. So it depends on your politics.
It depends on your politics, isn't it? Yeah. So it's hard to say, but it's much more difficult to improve intent. And if the person intended to be fraudulent, then yeah, you should pay. And there should be a licensing system. When you know something, do your research. Well, I say do your research. There should be a licensing system. And if you think that there might be something, and I've done that too, where I've sent something, I say, listen to this. And I've had the Copyright Office decide for me and say, no, there's no, and they're the ones that say, no, there is no similarity between this version of the tune and what you're trying to do. You own it. Boom. That's it. There's no argument. Because I did that, another person found me and says, we think we have your tune and we want to give you credit. Now, if I was a crook, I would say, oh, yes, give me the money. But when I listen to the thing, I says, no, this has nothing to do with my tune. Have at it. Do you see what I'm saying? So that's... So intent.
Okay. No, okay, apart from intent, I want to introduce something else.
Okay.
It's also opportunity.
Yes.
Did the person have the opportunity to hear your song? And let me tell you, let's turn it the other way around. I don't know that grime artist, right? But I know Ed Sheeran. So, if Ed Sheeran was suing that artist, it's pretty much home and dry. Because that artist cannot say he didn't have a chance to hear a Sheeran song because it's a mega song. So the opportunity to hear also impacts on the. So let me give you an example. In America, they stretched it. There's a case, the George Harrison case, My Sweet Lord, and He's So Fine. Because they didn't want to say George Harrison, who was one of the Beatles, infringed or stole or plagiarized, they stretched it to subconsciously copy. Subconsciously, because He's So Fine was a hit. But a person of George Harrison's caliber, we couldn't really say that he came and tried to steal the song. So at least, he had to pay. In fact, the copyright ended up being with his former manager, Klein. What's his name? Alan Klein.
Mm-hmm.
APCO Music is his company. He used to publish people like Sam Cooke. Having said that, can I just say, in case, what should I say, Wi-Fi isn't stable, and that's issue one, so I just want to recognize that we've got Professor Caroline Nkube in the room. Hi, I hope you're well. Are you comfortable to, at the very least, introduce yourself since you've made an effort to join us?
Coco, I'm really sorry to join so late, but very exciting things are happening where I am. My name is Caroline Nkube, and I'm an academic based at the University of Cape Town, currently attending a conference in Geneva. So don't let me hold you up. Sounds like they're really interesting conversations. I'm just going to retreat into my corner and listen to what you're saying.
Absolutely, but like us, this is a conversation, so we're glad that at least you've introduced yourself. But if you want to come in for however much is left of the time, you're more than welcome. So, yes,
nice to meet you, Caroline.
Hi, Caroline.
Hey, how are you doing?
Nice. Thank
you. Caroline, obviously you got some fans in there, Enrico, Laura, Marcus, and I'm sure there are others in the audience. So, what brought us to this George Harrison? Yeah, so Enrico posed the thing about Ed Sheeran's recent plagiarism situation. So, Carla, I'm not going. No, this is not to put you on the spot. So if you don't unmute, that's still fine. When we had the situation with Disney, Disney had the Lion King, and I think in that program there's it was based on African music and all that kind of thing. But the Lion Sleeps Tonight, I think, is used. And for those that know the copyright situation, the Lion Sleeps Tonight is very checkered, very checkered. It's a South African composition, and I'm sure what's his name, Linda, who wrote the song, probably didn't understand what a contract meant, let alone copyright. So I doubt very much whether they saw some money. But obviously, with Disney making so much money out of the Lion King, people took it upon themselves to say, Disney, you got to cough up some money. So there's a whole rigmarole about the chain of evidence and ownership of the copyright of the Lion, the, the Lion Sleeps Tonight. And I think the reason why I wish you can contribute was that I think reference was made to the Imperial Copyright Act of 1911, because we're saying that the South African Copyright Act, with a lot of Commonwealth countries, their copyright law came from that act, and it came into effect. And what happened, and I said this previously before it came, was that the 1911 Copyright Act had this sort of reversion clause where the last 25 years reverted to the author. So even if Linda, I forgot his first name, if the guy who wrote the Lion Sleeps Tonight didn't even sign a contract, didn't know anything about copyright, by law, it should have reverted to him. So this was mentioned that when the Lion Sleeps was created, it was still the 1911 copyright that was in place. So, do you feel comfortable, or as I said, I wasn't going to put you on pressure, but if you feel comfortable to maybe comment on a South African case in terms of Lion Sleeps Tonight, you're more than welcome to contribute into our conversation on that then.
Sure, Kwaku. Not very much to say, except that his name was Solomon, so it's Solomon Linda.
There you go.
Yeah. And you've got the facts absolutely correct, and you know the legal principles. The only thing perhaps I want to point out is, because I think tonight one of the themes is history, right?
Yes.
So it's interesting for me that at that point in South African law, they had to go backwards, right? Historical steps back to actually find a solution to a problem that they were facing in that moment. What's also really interesting to me is that a solution was found in colonial or imperial copyright law, which is also interesting, for want of a better word. And the last thing I wanted to say is that I'm sure you, of course, know that there's copyright reform going on in South Africa. In fact, there has been a bill that's been discussed, you know, since 2015. That's interesting as well. It's now 2022, right? 7 years is way too long to see legislative reform come to fruition. But one of the things that is being proposed in that bill is to try and find solutions for musicians and creatives who might find themselves in the same place as Solomon Linden. And again, in trying to solve contemporary problems, I still see people looking backwards to historical solutions to solve them. So it's really interesting how in the present we keep looking back to the history to find some solutions. And of course, you know, the history is colonial, and so that's also interesting. I've said interesting like 10 times.
Yeah. No, but it is. And in fact, no, thank you for that contribution, because that speaks to what we wanted to do today. In fact, when I started, I placed us in 1715, and I'm saying we're looking at the statute of Anne 1710. So let's talk in the context of that and bring it to 2022. So the fact that we have to go back is important, but I have to say that it just occurred to me that copyright law only does catch up, because you guys are looking at now, and Dr. Laura is talking about metaverse, in which we have to look at the future, in which the whole thing changed from our physical life to a whole thing called metaverse, and the copyright implications. The copyright law is not ready to deal with that. So by the time you've done your updated copyright law, you're out of, what should I say, out of sync. But then, since Dr. Marcus is here, let me just say that copyright law always takes time, because I used to write for Billboard in the 90s, and we'll look at copyright issues. And the song like No, 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 and Don, what's her name? The Jamaicans help me out, what's her name? Don, whoever sang, No, No,
Don
No.
Penn. Don Penn.
Don Penn. she believes she wrote it and all that kind of stuff. At that time, there was a copyright law that was supposed to be happening. Please tell me what is your current copyright law, because I can tell you that that conversation started a decade or more. So it takes a long time for these copyright laws to really hit the statute books. So what's your copyright law? What year does it say? Is this 2015?
Yes, that was the last amendment, 2015.
There you
Yes.
go. And I can tell you that in the 90s, when I was writing for Billboard, we're talking about a copyright law, and it's taken this long, 2015, for that to come into place. So it takes a long time, and will always be catch up. No, but Professor Carla, I think that is a good story. And we also have to look at Africa. And so you're giving us at least a perspective of Africa and what's happening there. Obviously, Marcus has talked about Jamaica. We've got about 15 minutes to wrap up. Where should we take the conversation? I think, Doctor, since I've got Marcus on screen, no, you've done one. Let me go to Laura. Do you want to take the conversation somewhere? Marcus has done one. What's his name? Enrico has done one. Do you want to take the conversation somewhere, maybe to the future with the metaverse?
Well, no, I won't go quite there yet, but there is something that
Okay.
that Professor Caroline mentioned, and this is really wonderful, and that I wanted to talk about with my dissertation study. I had to leave the United States towards the end of my study on globalization and its impact on music marketing and distribution. That's the title of this dissertation. I had to leave the United States, and I had to shift from the financial legal argument and shift to information systems and marketing from the standpoint of marketing and distributions. In order to finish this dissertation, I had to leave the United States and attend a conference in Leeds, at Leeds University, to only discover that the big businesses, all of the major labels at that time had researchers in other countries to determine how they can position their music product in the countries and bypass things like FCC and the other things that we normal people would have to deal with. And consequently, you know, there were only three people like me in the conference, and two of them were either cleaning something or for feeding, and so I'm the other person. And it's like, how did you get in? I say, I'm a student, and that was then, but I understood nodes then, and they weren't called nodes at that time. It was ways to position your product by bypassing the bureaucracy. And so a lot of what we've dealt with has been bureaucracy, and that is the thing that's taking time. Once I presented the study, my professor said to me, "What are you going to do next?" And I said, "I'm going to sleep." And I think I have been asleep until the actual technological nodes have now showed up to where we can reach people. And I'm not reach people in other places directly outside of bureaucracy, because the bureaucracy is so big now, they have no time to form the relationships that we are even forming now here. We can all upload, and this is where it goes into Web3 discussion. We can all upload things to IP, interplanetary file system right now, and then we'll all be peers. And I have access to all of your networks where you are, and you have access to all of my networks. Where's the bureaucracy? The bureaucracy is in the smart contract that we're designing. Okay, and that's where this is going, and it's going there quickly, and it's happening in multiple industries. There are already music streaming services out there under IPFS, interplanetary file system, because our current system does not have the capacity. That's what we're dealing with a capacity issue. What we have is HTTPS was never designed to, and you can look it up. It was never designed, it was never intended to take on the pressure that we're putting on these systems. And so it could never go to another planet, right? Nothing would ever go up there because it's too much. We're already having infrastructure challenges now. So I think we're in a very good place. And these conversations are the beginning not only of the smart contract, that they're the beginning of the DAOs, the decentralized autonomous organizations. It's the beginning of all of that the beginning of the rules of how we conduct ourselves in the future.
Absolutely.
And that will cause us
Absolutely.
to go back, like Professor Carolyn says. We need to go back because somewhere in between back and now is bureaucracy. And we've been just dealing with bureaucracy. There's not much creativity. It's just bureaucracy and back and forth. And so, I mean, that's the only thing that I would say. I hope I didn't ramble on too much, but I would
No, I
love to hear
mean,
your point about your ideas about that. Yeah, I think I said too much.
oh well, she's giving us a future that's now, and I think that's so. To me, that's why. Can I just say, if you don't mind, um, not so much plugging, but we've got two programs. One looking at NFTs, blockchain, blah blah blah, and Dr. Laura will be doing something looking at the metaverse because it's under the radar of most people, but that future is actually now. People, right, are getting serious money for, and they don't have to be superstars in the music business for pre-release before the record comes out. They've more than recouped into six-figure sums, and I'm not talking about superstars. Superstars get signed, and there's some not superstars. Let's say reasonably a reasonable level artist can get signed, and they're not seeing six-figure sums. Certainly after recoupment. So the NFTs and stuff is something that musicians should really be on top of. It's not just musicians, because Laura will tell you how someone has got, I think, a B&B business, and they can make it into an NFS, N,
FT,
NFT,
yeah.
NFT. So this is something that we really should be aware of. We are the cups, and the future, as I said, is now. So if she's taking it somewhere else, please remember that we went into the web, but now we're into Web 3, which is something else. Can I just, as a personal note, say I wore those virtual goggles for the first time last week.
Which
My
ones?
nephew brought me one.
The Oculus? Which
No,
ones?
I don't know what it's
Oh,
called.
okay.
But
Was it heavy? Was it heavy on your head?
No, it was
Okay.
quite light.
Okay.
But yeah, quite gloves, and then you got some hand pads too. And I did the boxing, and I said, and then he showed me something like Dubai, and you got all this 360, and I say, you know something, this is like way out there, but I know in 5 years' time, this will be nothing. This will be nothing. We'll be replicating real-time life situations that you cannot believe. And then deep fake as well. Deep fake. How are you to prove that this guy, Enrico, says he wrote this song or whatever, and we can have his face saying that and signing a contract? So how are you going to say that this contract hasn't been signed by Enrico?
Right.
So I think copyright has got a lot to deal with in the immediate future when we go into the metaverse. So where Dr. Lara is, we need to be somewhere there, or we'll be left behind.
I think
I'm
we're
looking for a
there.
long life.
I think
No, if it's not on our radar, till I saw you do that Zoom call, the metaverse was
Yeah.
not really on my radar. Even though I had these guys called, what are they called, Opulus, to do a session for us, and that's why I'm doing the sessions. People have got to be on top of this. It's not just for musicians; it's for anyone that has got content that can be monetized in this new world.
Yeah.
So we've got 10 minutes. Oh, no, actually, it's 5 minutes to wrap up. So maybe it's been a good conversation. Someone has just joined us. I forgot who just joined, but for whoever just joined us as well, you're more than welcome. We need to wrap up. Maybe we can have one topic, and then we can have a wrap up with everyone just saying, a quick half a minute wrap up. So, again, Enrico, do you want to take us somewhere in terms of what we started? Do you want to take us somewhere for a minute or two?
Yes, I mean, it's been a nice discussion starting from 1709, 1710 until NFTs. I mean, we have
Yes.
seen how far copyright needs to go to catch up with technology, right? So, if there is a lesson we can learn, is that technology goes faster than legislation.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And legislation needs to catch up all the time with
And can I just
either new laws or interpretations, judicial interpretation of existing laws to stretch the rule and to adapt it to the new medium support, to the new technology. So I think this represents a part of our discussion. Let's say.
Right. I just say it's not just about laws, it's what I need to catch up. Industry practices, because sometimes the law are there, but how do you have the will or the notion to apply? Let me give you an example. Spotify and those platforms. It's not mixed cloud. What's that? SoundCloud.
Yeah.
Spotify. Remember, at least 5 or 6 years ago, the PRS is the Corporate Collection Society in the UK. They were not paying, and they're discussing this. But although they were infringing, nobody was bringing them down. And it took a long time for the industry to come to an agreement as to how to monetize what's on there. These industry organizations are quick to bring down small players. But when you have the likes of YouTube, who are not paying at some time, you have SoundCloud. Yeah, I think it was SoundCloud and Spotify. It needs the industry to fashion an acceptable thing. And can I say that I find now that the industry is in a weaker position. The tech companies are in a powerful position and they really dictate. And lastly, before I leave the microphone, in terms of music business, the creative community had a bad deal because all the major companies took equity shares in all these enterprises. So they don't care whether the artist is paid 0.0000 of a penny because each year Spotify is making money. They get their shares from their equity in interest. So the creatives are in a really bad situation in terms of where we are out now, which is streaming, which is bringing the bucks, and the record companies are just criminal. Okay, so Dr. Lara, maybe to wrap up, you can go in any area, just like Enrico has a moment to go.
Oh, the I wanted to just provide just some clarity. It was a woman in South Africa who had an Airbnb, and she was just wondering how she could monetize her Airbnb. The Airbnb was a relaxation place for creatives, and so she was trying to figure out how she could posit that into the future. And I says, I'm a part of the Dramatists Guild, and there is a book that has places of relaxation for people so that they can go to and write and create. And so people, if she creates an NFT, she can maybe make 300 NFTs, and those 300 NFTs are bookings that people can purchase, and they can actually purchase an NFT, and that enables them to be at her place in South Africa. And it's an experience. It's not just a visit. You go to South Africa, you get the experience of being immersed in the culture, and you write and you do what you have to do, and that's a token. That token gives you access. Tokens are just what we used to use when people used to go play video games. You put a token in, you get to play for as long as you want. So that could be where we're going to, but as it relates to copyright, it's about relationship. And NFTs are about relationships as well. So maintaining and fostering those relationships and those nodes is going to be the thing that continues to make creatives authentic. Or else we will have a bunch of people acting like they are Dr. Marcus. And, and then we'll continue to be in litigation to try to prove Dr. Marcus is Dr. Marcus. Do we have his fingerprint? No, we need we need the eyes now. We need everything to just prove that the person Dr. Marcus is Dr. Marcus. So I would just say let's continue to build the relationships and have authenticity at the core of our creation.
Okay, before Dr. Marcus comes in, I want to jump off a comment you made previously in terms of going to the conference at Leeds. Yeah, I mean the big techs and the big companies, it's about. Actually, you do know that the techs are more powerful than governments right now.
Yes,
So
right.
If governments decide to enact some laws and they lobby against it and it still goes through, they have a way of jump, so they can either jump, go on the sides, or go underneath it. They got a whole lot of lobbies. But one of the things, and fun enough, I've been mentioning Professor Leslie quite a bit today. One of the things he was looking at is that even when people do not have the copyright, they can still control it. And if you look at technology, there are these locks. So let's say something's in public domain. Technically, everybody will have access to it. But if I digitize and put on there, the only way, and I put a pay wall or whatever, you don't have that free access, which in theory we should have for public domain products. So these technological companies or what should I say, business people can use technology to circumvent the spirit or the letter of the law. Right. Dr. Marcus.
You are in disruption now. You're in disruption. You are a disruptor. Yes.
Okay. Dr. Marcus, what do you want to leave us with?
Well, just to add on the same point, about disrupting, I think that looking at the 1710 to where we are now, and the whole copyright regime, and construct, it wasn't ours, right? It wasn't our construct. And so in looking at Black British Music Month and so forth, I think we need to think outside of the box, to see how we can ensure that some of these structures that we are used to working within and that we recognize don't always suit our interests. We can see how we can refashion them through lobbying, having more of a black lobby towards copyright, towards IP rights, that we can have more of our interests taken into account in the restructuring going forward, I didn't say this earlier, but I think in terms of even copyright too, we have to look at it from a perspective of also a reparatory framework where black people are concerned as well, and so I would love for, again, more forums like these to bring persons together so we can actually have these discussions that we have a lobby as well. We have persons in the industry who are world famous, large and small, north and south, and so we can do more for our people together if we work together toward those objectives.
Oh my goodness. I'll tell you something. I think I made contact with Professor Caroline because Enrico and I were we made a bid, a copyright conference bid, right? And it was looking at copyright from a left and a south perspective. We just talked about the north and south perspective. So yeah, it was coming from the south perspective. It was coming from a left. Like one of the things we had to talk about, let's have a greenfield. If copyright was new, what are the things we would want in copyright? So,
yes.
And so we didn't get the funding, but that's something that I hope that we can move forward at some time. So the other thing I'll say, I'm a Pan-Africanist. So I'm not just interested in having Africans. It has to be Africans who've got a Pan-Africanist agenda. You mentioned we're not there when copyright was set. That's true. One of the things I like someone to do, not me certainly, is that I've seen the recitals for how the Berne Convention came about. It would be nice, and at that time, there were only 3 so-called independent African countries: Haiti, Liberia, and Ethiopia. So I'm interested to know and it's all in there. I just haven't had time to delve into it. But to see what was the introduction from, let's say, a non-West point of view. Were there people from, let's say, non-European or the USA feeding into this thing? Because if you go into African systems, copyright really is anti-African in a sense, because we normally come from a communal system in which no one is supposed to own anything. And the whole point of copyright is predicated on the individual, that one person being the creative person, whether it's Beethoven or something. So and copyright does not really allow for collective in terms of, that's why you got things like traditional and all these indigenous things. And it's not quite, because it's very Eurocentric, but I think we're supposed to wind down. So I think, Professor Karen, I just saw a smile from you, so I hope you can give us your lasting comments.
Well, I'm going to try. So I've been listening to everybody, and I wrote down 3 words, right?
Oh, great.
And my 3 words are people, power, and platforms. And what I was thinking about those 3 words is listening to everybody in the last few minutes. It's all about people. And for me, the most important people would be the creatives, right? So even as we say that the platforms have got power, for me, then the question is, as the creatives become lost in the scene, what should they be doing whilst the law is catching up, right? Because we're clear that the law is very slow, right? So that's just my thought on people. Power, I think that's been said over and over again. Who holds the power? You've just said it's the technological platforms that seem to be holding the power. And for platforms, and I've said the word already, the question for me then would be how then in the scene of people perhaps being lost, power being disproportionately held by technological platforms and major players, how then do we get justice and fair returns for creatives in this context that is rapidly evolving? So just my thoughts listening to everybody. People, power, platforms.
That is fantastic. I think probably going forward with Dr. Lara with a metaverse thing, my impression seems to me that this metaverse is supposed to be democratic platform. So maybe it will be more of an even playing field. But let's be honest, I did a book because I'm terrible at quoting people. I did a book called African Voices, Quotations by People of African Descent. So I'm always, what should I say, measuring people's quotations. But what was I? Yeah, in there I had the quotation. I can't even remember my old quotation, so I'm not going to quote it correctly. But I said, in the end, business commodifies everything. So even though we're going into metaverse saying it's democratic, you find out that business will find a way of conglomerating and controlling. I remember at the birth of the internet, these guys came and said, yes, businesses are not going to be here. It's us who are going to control, blah, 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 blah. Before you knew, organizations like BBC were on the internet and see where we are at now. So, Dr. Lara, when we come next month, I hope you can tell us just about the vision and the reality of making sure that the decentralized thing actually says decentralized and that it ends up being a democratic thing, one person, one vote, literally, as opposed to 2 people, 1,000 votes, if you know what I mean, in terms of Google and was it Netflix, not Netflix, or was Facebook and stuff like that. So on that note, I have to say thank you very much. Dr. Marcus, you did give your last thing, didn't you? I just want to make sure you did.
Yes,
okay.
I did. Thank
okay,
you.
my head is zooming, so I can't remember. So in that case, I want to say, look, thank you. Enrico had an idea about how I wanted this conversation to go. Personally, I can say that it's been fantastic. I'm glad that you've indulged us by coming through this. It wasn't the usual presentation type thing, but let's have a conversation. And it's going to certain places that I didn't know. So to me, I have learned. So on behalf of myself and Enrico, I want to thank you all as our special guests and the people in the audience. Thank you and have a blessed day. And those that can join us in subsequent events are more than welcome. But this is a good one, and we end on this note. Safe journey to your bedroom or your sitting room or wherever you are.
One more thing. I just wanted to let everybody know that we did stream this on my platform, which is we were on Roku, Apple TV, Fire TV, Android TV, and on mobile devices. So
you know something, I don't have I have terrestrial TV, but I don't have all these satellite TVs and blah blah. So that's how 20th century I am. So when you say Roku, how does one find? I don't know. So you know,
I'll send you some tidbits, and I will probably rebroadcast this.
Links. I have to understand links.
No worries. I'll send the rebroadcast to you as well, so that and we'll probably rebroadcast over Juneteenth, which begins. They're going to celebrate all weekend, so yeah. I think it's informative.
If you send me link, it makes sense to me. If you send
High
me
five.
link, it makes sense to me. Okay,
all right. Bye bye. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye bye.
Thank you.
Safe journey. Bye bye.
Bye bye, everybody.
Bye bye.
Recordings